curiosity is more important than like certainty, especially now.
Absolutely.
Is this going to matter a week from now? Is this going to matter a month from now? Is this going to matter a year from now? Team members who bring new ideas, things that I couldn't have come up with.
We can kind of let go a little bit of that really narrow attention or kind of hyper focus.
I'm Dr. Amy Athey. As a licensed psychologist and performance expert, working with elite athletes, C-suite executives, and high performers operating in some of the most demanding environments, I've seen what it truly takes to perform when it matters most. From supporting members of the Naval Special Warfare community to advising leaders in high-stakes, high-pressure situations, one truth remains consistent. The tools that drive performance are the same. You prepare in a way that allows you to show up ready when the moment arrives. Each week, I'll share practical tools and insights to help you strengthen how you think, lead, and perform. Welcome to Still Evolving.
Manny, welcome to Still Evolving. Grateful for you and this opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel honored.
Awesome. Well, why don't we start off and giving the opportunity for you to share on your journey. Can you share a bit on your background as well as what you're doing now with our audience?
Yeah, so I sit in the intersection of data insights and strategy. I work for a company called Ipsos. The leadership position that I maintain there is leading commercial strategy and transformation. I think when I think, and I'll tie back to that, but when I think about my journey's always been a little bit side quested than maybe others that are in roles that I have now. So I sort of grew up learning how things get done. So the operational parts of the business, my intellectual curiosity around media and tech and just technology in general helped move me into consulting roles that were oriented to those types of customers. And then that graduated into being able to manage businesses, P&Ls, putting together business plans, operating models, and so forth. And now that we're in a world that is changing rapidly or evolving rapidly, and it's hard to play catch up on all of those changes, having that experience of having to adapt to different types of roles against one center of gravity, and then now applying that in a sort of transformation, context has been an interesting journey, but it's also it's going to help benefit me at this point in my career.
For sure. I can appreciate with that change, whether it's present or even as you've evolved in your leadership roles, that it's not for the faint of heart, I like to say. I mean, change, just by human nature, we kind of resist that. We have our own reactions, and certainly for some, it's more disruptive than others. But this is a time where I've commonly find myself in conversation with leaders around how they can best show up for their team. And I'm curious from your experience and your journey or even present day, like what are some of your takeaways that you've seen really help strengthen leadership in times of change or uncertainty? What have been kind of the lessons learned, perhaps even from observing other leaders show up in a way that was really effective or not so much?
Yeah, good question. And I might think about when we all had to learn to be different, and that was 6 years ago during a global pandemic. But when I think, what I've learned is that pressure can narrow your perspective. And when you're overwhelmed, everything starts to feel urgent. Everything starts to feel very personal. So when that happens, I try to zoom out and maybe ask a couple simple questions. Is this going to matter a week from now? Is this going to matter a month from now? Is this going to matter a year from now? And almost always the answer is no. And I think, sort of keeping that perspective just helps me focus on what truly matters in the moment, and then let go of the things that are just sort of noise, that like temporary noise. And I think, the other thing that helps is movement, so I'm very active. I climb mountains. I do a lot of hiking. I've got a Siberian Husky who also mirrors, well, maybe I mirror his activity, but like running and walking and being outdoors. And so some of my best thinking happens when I step away from my office or my desk and I'm out amongst the cedar trees here in Austin, just sort of walking, hiking.
Yeah, absolutely. That role of perspective is so critical, and you're spot on. Under stress, we know neurophysiologically our attentional, I guess our visual space even narrows, right? And so cognitively, we can also become more rigid. And the power of those questions that you asked really affords us the opportunity to not only step back, but also work a bit of that psychological flexibility, right? So how we can kind of let go a little bit of that really narrow attention or kind of hyper focus. And oftentimes that flexibility is what helps illuminate a more viable or more impactful path forward.
Totally. I mean, I think like early in my career, when I started to be put into leadership positions, I thought leadership meant I have to have all of the answers, or, I have to be the one out in front, leading the charge, or the first one to the top of the mountain, whatever analogy you want to use. But over time, I started to realize that leadership's actually about creating an environment like where the best answers can come from or emerge, sort of emerge from. Mm-hmm. And so as responsibilities grow, you realize that you need to stop being the person who has to solve every problem yourself. Instead, your job becomes like, well, how can I set the direction? Or how can I bring the right group of people together? How can I create trust with those people or my stakeholders or whatever? How can I then help them do their, best work? I think that shift really helped me to see and to realize that being more curious, and this is, I think I might have mentioned this to you when we first chatted, but like when I hire somebody, the number one thing I always look for is intellectual curiosity. But what it helped me to do is realize that curiosity is more important than like certainty, especially now when there's just a lot of uncertainty.
Right. Absolutely. It's a common tool, if you will, that we talk about on this podcast, is the power of that curiosity and how that tool can be used in a number of different situations, right? Like whether it's in crisis, whether it's in conflict, whether, as you mentioned, you're trying to kind of innovate through times where you don't have a complete data set and it's not all like perfectly laid out for you. The more we can be curious, again, that it kind of spurs that openness and ideas, options, and also the defensiveness kind of goes away, and hopefully the team can come together. What influenced you? So I'm curious, Manny, like we've talked about the power of perspective taking, certainly the fundamentals of like, we need to move. We need to get away from these desks and connect with nature perhaps, or just again, kind of refuel the system a little bit by stepping back. And then you talk about the power of curiosity. I'm curious of who influenced you, or kind of how have you learned and some of these lessons and incorporated them into your leadership philosophy?
Yeah. This is it's a simple question, but it might have some complexities in how I answer it, because it could get kind of personal. So we'll sort of see how I'm feeling as I share this. But I think the simple answer is I've been very fortunate to have like mentors and colleagues who have challenged me. They've challenged me intellectually, for example. But one thing that I've realized, over time is that growth, particularly like personal growth, whether you want to define that as professional, growth from a personal level, or just how you grow as a human being. It's not going to come from the same people. It's not going to come from the same sort of formal mentors that I've been assigned over the years. It could come from, coworkers who maybe challenge my patience. They might rub me the wrong way, and like you learn from that. Or team members who bring new ideas, things that I couldn't have come up with. Right. Or, and this is where it might, touch on more personal, just, difficult life experiences that force you, like you have to grow in those situations. So one of the most valuable things I think you can then do as a leader is to surround yourself with people who are not afraid to disagree with you, because I think that's how we evolve. And I am I'm a staunch advocate for that, both professionally and in my personal life. We all have the things that we believe. Our belief systems cause us to interpret the same facts differently. We make different decisions off of the same pieces of information. And so, if I disagree with somebody politically, those are typically the people I'm most friendly with. Or if I disagree with somebody, at work, that's the person I'm going to spend the most time with, because that person's challenging me to learn and grow. So, sorry, I'm starting to ramble at the end, but that's my answer.
No, I think it's great. Oftentimes when we're in the period of very fast-paced, dynamic, and uncertain world, right? Whether that's in our personal life, as you mentioned, we can go through personal changes and challenges, or even professionally. That load, that stress on our human system often we talked about earlier, you kind of guard down, perhaps take a more defensive posture, less psychologically flexible. And so when we're around others who may look at that problem and possible solutions differently, who may hold just a different worldview, I think it can be very uncomfortable. And in further uncomfortable, we kind of dismiss it. We become more defensive, or we can even take it personally, right? I'm reminded, there's a colleague in the sports psychology industry, very accomplished, seasoned sports psychologist. And interpersonally, he comes off with quite an arrogance or an ego, right? And I remember early on at a conference, someone said, "Oh, so-and-so is giving this talk." And I was in a group, kind of small group conversation, and somebody says, "I can't handle it. I'm not going." And I said, "You know what? I think if you can get past the presentation, the experience and what can be shared is tremendously valuable. I don't have to agree with it all, right? I don't have to just absorb it without filter or contemplation, critique, but to dismiss it right off the guard just because ultimately what it comes down to is interpersonally, you don't like that person. That interpersonally, that person kind of how they showed up rubbed you the wrong way. Of course, there are deal breakers of respect and boundaries. I get all of that. But with the assumption that those are intact, there's really a lot of opportunity just to listen. It goes back to that curiosity tool that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the risk is an echo chamber, and then we're not learning from that. We're just hearing what we want to hear, and that could reinforce some good things, or that could reinforce some bad things.
Right. Absolutely. This is a heck of a grind though, Manny. You mentioned earlier how sometimes stepping away, physical activity, connecting with nature, you have your dog, those elements really do help provide you space to kind of recover and also clearly and more creatively think about your work. Are there other ways that you have found that you've sustained this high performance over time? Something else that's been helpful in kind of refueling or recharging? Or even better yet, what have you found as a leader ensuring that your team can offset that load, right? So you'll hear a lot about burnout, and I'll be one of the first to kind of rail on the one-off, we're going to do a stress management. I always find it humorous at universities, they offer stress management the week before exams. I'm kind of dude, not really sure what that's going to do. But nonetheless, what are some ways that you refuel, or as a leader, some considerations in mind to support your team and ensuring that they are refueling along the year?
Yeah. Okay. Good. I think that's a good question. For me, I think it comes from remembering that my job is something that I do, and it's not who I am. So I think it's very easy in leadership roles in particular to let your identity become tied to like your title or the success that you might get from your, professional identity. But the things that really keep like me grounded are the things that are adjacent to all of this. It's like the relationships you have, and they can be professional relationships as well. The values, we all bring to the table a core set of values, and those things tend to be durable and they don't change that frequently throughout your life. And so sort of staying grounded around your values. And then the people you choose just to have like around you. I've also learned that like humility is a very important thing. And when you're young, and maybe you are you overfunction, professionally, it's easy for humility to go out the door because you think there's nothing that can stop you. But realizing that you're the person that's going to trip yourself up, like it's just a really important, reminder to not sort of burning out yourself because you can only overfunction for so long. And then no matter how like experienced you are, the world's constantly going to change. There's always going to be something new to learn. And I think, that might even just keep tying back to the curiosity piece, but like that mindset then helps me to stay more open and adaptable. Just from a real practical perspective, my calendar is blocked every day from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. I use that time, and I work for a global company where our world headquarters is in France. So there's a lot of calls that happen before your normal business hours. But by default, my calendar's blocked because that's when I use, it's like personal reflection. That's when I'm reading, things that might be, professional reading. That's also when I like work out. Like I religiously go to the gym or run almost every day because that prevents me from just being unhealthy, working late. Oh, I'm gonna have some drinks. I'm gonna go like it could happen. Your physical decline and then your emotional decline. All that could happen so quickly. So I try to just be very cognizant of that, and I encourage my team to like do those same things. I'm all about wellness days. I'm all about like, and we don't work in an environment where I'm gonna watch I guess we do watch their time because we are professional service company, charge our clients time. But it's like, if you need to leave, like take a 3-day weekend, you should do it. If you need to, block your calendar for 2 hours in the middle of the day to recalibrate, you should do it. So I try to live by example and then afford the people that work with me or for me the same opportunities my leaders gave me when I was going through periods of distress or being overwhelmed or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is tremendously powerful. In the world of sport, I always used to chuckle, especially when recovery as being the number one performance enhancer, sleep, for example, sleep being the number one performance enhancer. That mantra and very actionable framework came about probably around 2009-ish, 2010. You started seeing it kind of reverberate around elite athletics. And some coaches, I used to kind of chuckle. They would fully embrace the talk and they would share the information with their team, talking about the research and the science behind how sleep and active recovery was the number one performance enhancer and how critical it was. And then they send out, we share some tips, tools, strategies. Team would leave and then they would be in the office until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Some of them would sleep there. And I just kind of would chuckle. I'm kind of like, yeah, they're maybe not executing the plays in the field, but you're a performer too, right? Like you're calling the plays, you're scouting the team.
Yeah.
And I used to kind of chuckle. So I applaud and very much appreciate how you are not only taking steps to bring understanding and support of your team, and even challenging them at times to maybe step back for that bit of refueling, but also that you're modeling it yourself. Because I think at times it's really easy as a leader. Even in my role as a parent, like, it's really easy to say what you should do, but people are going to learn from observation, and being able to observe someone else modeling that in their leadership is so vital. So thank you.
I forget who it was. I forget who it was that told me this. But it's like, okay, it's the end of the day. And our end of the days can be different things. It doesn't need to be like, but right at 5 o'clock, our day ends. And you feel like you can't stop working because you've got these 6 things you have to get done. And a leader, I think it was a leader of mine, just said, you're going to get those 6 things done. And when you're done with those 6 things, there's going to be another 6 things. And it's like, you're never going to get everything done. That's just why you have a job that's full time. You come in every day. So you have to create, you used the word boundaries earlier. You have to create boundaries like that. Because those 6 things don't get done today, they'll get done tomorrow, but there's going to be another 6 things. So if you're constantly just trying to get to completion, it's just never going to happen. It'll drive you insane.
Absolutely. Healthy, effective reminder. Manny, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for being on Still Evolving, and I look forward to more conversations.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a nice discussion.